Hello, welcome to the Comic Book Commentary. I'm Bo Leidig, and this week we're going to be talking about the next issue in the Union miniseries with Union number 2. So let's zoom in and take a closer look. First published in October of 1993, Union number 2 keeps in the early Image tradition of coming out really late in terms of when it should have. The first issue came out in June of 1993. If you haven't seen my video on Union number 1, I suggest you take a look at that before watching this. The cover on this book, pretty cool. Not as ornate as the cover of the first issue, but that's to be expected. You want to make a splash with the issue number 1 cover, so I understand this one taking a step back in terms of not having the holofoil and whatnot. That's okay. But once again, it's a shame that this book was 4 months late coming to press. Mike Heisler, co-creator and story. Jim Lee, co-creator. Mark Texeira, art. Ben Fernandez, Joe Dunn, and Digital Chameleon, color separations. Jeff Mariotti, co-scripter. Joe Chiodo and Wendy Fouts, and Paige Apfelbaum, colors. Dennis Heisler, Chris Milos, production. John Costanz, sorry John, I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong, letterer. And Joe Mendoza, editor. We see here on the first page that Omen, aka Union, and Jill Monroe have left the state of Maine and are now currently in New York City. This is so that Jill can present her artwork to the galleries in New York, and in the meantime, the two of them are just wandering through the streets of New York City, just kind of taking in the sights. Once again, Omen is an alien from another world, so he's wanting to learn more about human culture. In fact, on this page, he makes a remark about how the rock stars of the time in 1993 are wearing tattered clothes, and he wonders why this is if they have so much money at their disposal, and that if the tattered look is somehow more expensive or whatnot. And Jill just kind of states that it's somewhat hard to explain. As the two of them continue to roam the streets of New York, taking in the sights, enjoying each other's company, and engaging in small talk, their quote-unquote date is interrupted by the sirens of police cars as they are moving towards the scene of a crime. Omen decides to try and get a better view of what's happening as he pulls out his justice staff and starts to fly above the crowd. Jill turns around, sees what's happening, and is somewhat distraught by it as she demands that he gets back down onto the ground, and that she doesn't want other people to see him or realize that he has these abilities. She is still not keen on Omen playing the role of superhero, even though he feels a strong sense of duty to protect innocent people and, thinks that his abilities give him, the obligation, per se, to stand up and help people when he can. So she concedes that they need to go and take a closer look at what's happening to make sure that the police don't need any help. But he puts his justice staff away and they decide to walk it instead. I'd also like to point out, I really like this panel right here with the two police cars, as this is actually really well drawn and these cars look very realistic. The perspective is fantastic. I bring this up because I've noticed there are a lot of artists who, while they might be really talented at drawing the human figure, they are sometimes not so talented at drawing other objects, and I wouldn't say phone it in, but just don't put in the same level of quality in that work. Whereas in this case, Mark Texeira really has some very realistic looking police cars right here. I think this looks really cool. On the next page, we see that the two of them have gotten to the scene of the crime, but are stopped at the police wall, and one of the officers will not let them get any closer. And they're then interrupted as the supervillain known as the Quickness dashes out of a savings and loan that he's just robbed, stops when he sees the police line, makes a point to mock them and basically state that there's nothing that they can do to stop him, as he then decides to take off at lightning speed, running right through their lines. Omen decides to jump in and help. Unfortunately for him, the police believe that he is an accomplice to the quickness and decide to open fire upon him. Luckily, Omen's justice staff is more than enough to stop the bullets in their tracks. The police officers are stunned that they were ineffective and that he had no trouble preventing any of their bullets from connecting. He lands as the police tell him to give himself up. He puts the justice staff away and basically says that he's here to help. However, the police don't believe him and he surrenders. They ask if he has anyone with him. He states no, not wanting to get Jill involved in being arrested. However, Jill, for some reason, takes offense to this, as, I don't know, it's odd. You'd think she'd be happy that he's trying to prevent her from also coming to the police station and being placed in handcuffs. However, she's upset at the fact that he said he was alone. We then see here inside of the police station, he is being interviewed by one of the detectives. He states that, they've gone over this multiple times. He's telling them the truth, that he is a superhero. However, the detective is not buying it. Omen then tells him that his uniform is in the bag that he has with him, and that if he brings it to him, he'll show him. The detective still thinks that Omen is full of it, but decides to go get the bag for him anyway and tells Omen to hold tight and stay where he's at. On the next page, we see that Jill is back out on the streets by herself, walking along, thinking to herself, she's still angry at Omen. And in this page and this panel, we do get the explanation that it's more so for the fact that he's wanting to play the role of superhero, and that, she really does not want him to pursue that venue at all. She wants to basically have him settle down with her. She's also upset by the fact that she's now, got no idea how long he's going to be at the police station, and she's not sure what she's supposed to do besides wander around or perhaps wait back for him at the YMCA, which is where they're staying. And then she's interrupted when a mugger quickly grabs her purse and runs off. She is, of course, very distraught by this, mostly because of the fact that the purse contained all of the slides from her portfolio that she was going to show to the art galleries that they were planning on visiting. The mugger makes no short work of losing her in terms of disappearing into the crowd, and she can no longer find him. Back at the police station, we see that Omen is now wearing his uniform and telling the detective that he is a superhero named Union. The detective still doesn't buy it, even though he's got this uniform on him. The detective says he sees crazies dressed up in weird outfits all the time. It doesn't make them superheroes. So Omen finally decides to give in and give him a contact number. The police department then enters in the contact information that they were given by Omen. His fingerprints coming up in the database, and it shows that he is approved by Stormwatch, but that they are to proceed with caution as his abilities are yet unknown. So the police then realize that since he's been given the green light by Stormwatch, that they have no reason to hold him here. However, they're not too keen on letting him back into the streets, though they don't have a way to keep him at the police department anymore, as we overhear a report of the quickness coming in over a radio. Back in the hotel room that they're staying at in the Y, we see Jill is watching the same news report on the TV, as the reporter states that the quickness has been going on a rampage all through New York City, causing multiple injuries, tons of damage, has already stolen over $2 million in cash, and has even killed several people. And to some extent, Jill now starts to realize that Omen had the right idea in wanting to stop this guy, as he is a violent and dangerous individual, but she still thinks that it's more so the job of the police, but is now questioning the police ability to handle a threat of this magnitude. Back out in the streets of New York, we see the Quickness once again thwarting the police, running around, smacking them, knocking them down, taunting them. However, due to him being distracted by the police officers surrounding him, Omen is able to swoop in and get the drop on the Quickness and grab him by the arm. Unfortunately for Omen, this was not the right move, as he is suddenly locked on to the Quickness and unable to let go. As he states, it's like grabbing a live electrical wire. The Quickness, now seemingly powered up even more, starts to take off and take Omen for a ride as he dashes through the streets of New York City and smashes through cars and walls of buildings, causing even more destruction than before. We see here on the next page that the Quickness is still just running at light speed right through the middle of buildings, crashing through cars, taking Union along for the ride. As he states, he feels so charged up. Union feels himself getting weaker and realizes that he has to find a way to let go of the Quickness as they smash through another building. And in his state of losing consciousness, he decides that he has to find a way to slow down the Quickness, so he pulls out the justice staff and stabs it directly into the ground. This causes the Quickness to stumble a bit and finally can no longer keep going at the same pace, which allows Union to let go. Unfortunately for Union, he's still moving at the super speed that the Quickness had him moving at, and he can't stop in time before he smashes through a large plate glass window. Of course, the owner of said window is not too happy about the fact that it has been completely destroyed. He begins to yell at Union, telling him that he needs to pay for this. Union tells him that the police will take care of it. The owner of the window says they had better. Then Union flies up to try and get a bird's eye view of the city to see if he can possibly locate the Quickness once again, and believes that he has, as he cuts off who he thinks is the Quickness, only to find out that it is none other than Velocity from Cyberforce. If you'd like to know about Cyberforce and Velocity, please check out my playlist on Cyberforce. Union realizes his mistake, as this is clearly not the person he's looking for, and tells her that he's sorry for interrupting her and stating that he's looking for a man. She says that she, of course, does not fit the bill, and that she has to get back to her home, as she was working on a roast of some kind and needed a few more ingredients, but had to get back before any of it burned. So she takes off, as we see Union is now feeling rather tired and rather defeated by the fact that he wasn't able to aid the police in the way that he wanted to. Later on, Union arrives back at the hotel room that he and Jill were sharing and begins to tell Jill about his quote-unquote adventure, of how he did battle with the Quickness and of how he met another quote-unquote superhero in Velocity. However, I don't know why he would necessarily believe that Velocity was a superhero, as she didn't really state that she was. I mean, he's correct. She is a superhero, but she never brought that to his attention. However, Jill is not too pleased by hearing any of this. She's more upset about the fact that she's been stuck in the hotel all day, and that while he was out playing superhero, she got mugged and had all of her personal belongings stolen, her portfolio, all of the spare cash that they had. And if it weren't for the fact that she had happened to leave the keys to the car back here at the hotel room, they'd have no way of leaving. And, you know, she then begins to question what Union's motives are for becoming a superhero, as before all he stated was that he wanted to try and get back to his home world, among other things. Union then shoots back that he does want to get back to his home world at some point, and that the only reason he's still on Earth is because Jill kept him hidden away from the world and, you know, tried to, hold on to some sort of, as he puts it, infantile infatuation with him. She then, of course, is very upset at his tone and the things that he's saying, so she's had enough and states that she's packing her bags and heading back to Maine, that the room is paid for a few more days. He can stay here until the time is up, and then afterwards can do whatever he likes, because at this point she's had enough, as she slams the door and exits the room. However, the television in the room is still on, and another news report comes on of the Quickness running amok in New York City, as we see Union realize that he's got to go back after the Quickness and see if he can catch him this time. Later on in Central Park, we see the Quickness is running through the middle of the park, throwing money all over the place to try and cause commotion behind him, mocking the people who are picking it up, which is odd, just kind of showing that overall the Quickness is kind of a jerk of a guy. He's been running around town robbing places all day long for all of this cash, and now he's mocking all the people that he's throwing the cash to, basically saying that they need to get down in the muck on their knees and beg for it. We then see Union approaching quickly. Right, this is a cool shot here, a nice little action shot, really emphasizing how fast he's able to fly, as he catches the Quickness once again and taps him on the shoulder, and then cracks him across the face with his justice staff, knocking the Quickness down and into a lamppost. However, the Quickness is pretty tough, as he bounces back and gets on his feet, and then states that he's happy to see the quote-unquote human battery again and wants to go for another round. Union, however, doesn't seem to be ready to fight, as he approaches the Quickness slowly and grabs onto him again. The Quickness says that this is a bad idea, that he shouldn't be grabbing onto him after what happened last time. However, Union takes his hand and puts it directly against his Justice Stone. Quickness then happens to state that this hurts, and then Union tells him that that's the general idea, as he starts to really put forth the power out of the Justice Stone, as we see a large burst of energy across the city skyline. Later on, we see Union talking to a detective, the detective asking if he's okay, as it appears Union was knocked unconscious by this exchange with the Quickness. And we see that the Quickness is now unconscious himself, sprawled out in the middle of the park. The police tell him that the Quickness is going to be arrested and held for questioning, as well as being charged with all of the crimes that he's committed during the day. The detective then asked Union how he knew, or how he was able to subdue him. Union states that he figured out that the Quickness was siphoning his energy from their first encounter, and then believed that he was somehow siphoning energy from an external source to power himself. So Union believed that if he gave him enough energy through the Justice Stone, that he could overload, per se, the Quickness and take him out, which is exactly what happened and what worked. We then find out that the Quickness's costume is actually wired directly into his central nervous system. The only part he can actually remove is just the mask, which is kind of crazy, kind of a really almost terrible type of thing, I guess, being that he's just stuck wearing this outfit for the rest of his life. The detective even mentions he wonders what kind of sick human being would do that to him. And Union says that he believes that they'll be able to find said sick human being by discovering where the energy was coming from. And we see, however, that someone is in a dark van parked conspicuously on the opposite side of the park, speaking of how it's already too late and that they're not going to be discovered as we reach the end of the story in this book. On the next page, we see the letter section, now referred to as Communion, where it's the standard fare of people writing in to talk about how great they thought the first issue was. Though I do find it funny, one of the writers actually in their letter wrote, "Please don't be late with the second issue," which is kind of sad that by the time this book came out in October of 1993, actually, no, not even then. It was June of 93 when the first issue came out. So that's when people would have been writing their letters in. So at this point, they would have been receiving them probably in July of 1993. Keep in mind, Image Comics basically launched in May of 1992. So basically, in just a little bit over a year's time, it's become so cliche of Image books not coming out on time that we actually see writers writing, or readers writing in asking that these creators get their books out on time like they're supposed to. It's very telling of much of the warranted criticism that was levied against the creators at Image Comics. And one of the things that, you know, kind of led to, this Image being the butt of a lot of jokes, I should say. They're still around today, obviously. They still produce a lot of comics to this day, obviously. But, some of that criticism has stayed with them. There is still that, kind of lack of professionalism stigma that still lingers 30 years later. And this was the reason why, was so many people's first impression of Image was of creators kind of dropping the ball. Here on the next page, we see a full page splash image of Union flying across some planet in outer space. It looks really cool. I like this a lot. And on the next page, we see a advertisement for Wizard magazine, because what early Image book would be complete without an advertisement for Wizard magazine? Because Wizard was advertising in nearly every single comic book that Image put out at this time. Here on the next page, we get a 2-page vertical advertisement for the team up between Wildcats and Cyberforce. If you'd like to know more about Wildcats and or Cyberforce, check out my playlist on Wildcats and Cyberforce. Here on the next page, we see an advertisement for Stormwatch issue number 7. If you'd like to know more about Stormwatch, check out my Stormwatch playlist. Then we see an advertisement for Jim Lee Skycaps. These are Pogs, people. That's what these are. These are just Pogs. These are Jim Lee not wanting to pay the money to use the Pogs brand name and just creating Pogs himself. And even then, 93, I guess this probably would have been about the height of Pogs' popularity nationally. Personally, I always thought Pogs was quite possibly one of the dumbest games ever invented. I never understood why it got so popular. I didn't like it at the time, and I would have been the exact age child that these were being marketed to, but I just could not get into them. I always felt the game was silly and was basically just completely random as to how it played. Very little skill involved is how it felt to me, but those are just my opinions. Maybe you thought Pogs was the best game that was ever made, but given that it's basically never talked about anymore, and I can't remember the last time I ever saw any Pogs or heard of any kids playing it, I feel like it's something that I was more in the majority of in terms of how far it went. On the next page, we see an advertisement for the new album from the Dakota Motor Company, which is a band I had literally never heard of before in my life until reading this book. Apparently they were a Christian band. I actually found them on YouTube and listened to some of the music just to see, what they were playing. It's kind of, alterna rock type of thing. Pretty common for 1993. I didn't think it was all that great, but maybe they were a band you really liked. Given that I can't remember ever hearing anything about this band or ever hearing any of their music ever before now, I can't imagine that they were terribly successful in their music careers, but they had to have had a following somewhere. And on the reverse inside cover, we see an advertisement for The Kindred, which is a mini-series team-up between Grifter and Backlash, two very awesome characters that exist within the Wildstorm universe. I don't know if I have every issue of this miniseries. I know I have at least a couple, but I'm going to make sure that I have all of them before I try and do any videos on this miniseries. And that was issue number 2 of the Union miniseries. Overall, I thought it was a pretty good book. I might be a little biased. As I stated in my first video on Union, I really do like this character. I do enjoy this title quite a bit. Um, I find one point of the story a little bit weird, how Jill was so angry at Omen for, wanting to quote unquote be a superhero and trying to help people that were in harm's way and in very real danger from, this superpowered criminal that was, causing tons of damage, killing people in his wake. And seeing that even though he had the ability to help all those people that were in need, that she felt that he shouldn't, it just seems odd, a little, I don't know, self-serving in the fact that, she very much is in love with Omen, but to the point where she kind of wants to just keep him all to herself and doesn't want to have to share him with the world. It's weird. It's like an odd form of jealousy per se. But we'll see where it goes in future issues. Those are just my opinions. Maybe you think that story point makes a lot of sense. Maybe you're with me and you don't like it. Maybe you don't like this book at all. But it's okay to have differing opinions. Everyone's entitled to their own opinions. If you enjoyed today's video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And thanks for stopping by. Have a great day.